My roommate tried to brew beer in our bathtub. It exploded, destroyed the apartment, and got us almost evicted. You know how every shared apartment has that roommate hobby that takes over the whole living space? Plants, gaming rigs, MLM protein powder pyramids? Mine was beer. Specifically, bathtub beer. And my roommate, let's call him Caleb, wasn't just a hobbyist. He was a missionary with a plastic airlock. Caleb moved into our 2-bed, 1-bath in Cleveland last fall after answering my Craigslist ad with a paragraph that began, "I'm chill," and ended with, "I cook." Somewhere in the middle he wrote, "I'm really into artisanal stuff." In retrospect, that was the red flag. Artisanal is one of those words that either means, "I have good coffee," or "I'm about to legally reclassify your living room as a workshop." He worked nights at a bar that thought Edison bulbs were a business model, and took a self-guided online course in fermentation science, which I later learned meant he watched a guy on YouTube named Brew Daddy 42 pour sugar into buckets while a labradoodle barked. Caleb was a good hang in small doses, funny, generous with takeout, the kind of person who'd Venmo you instantly for utilities. But he had the attention span of a fruit fly and the confidence of a TED Talk. It started innocently enough. One Saturday, he came home with a grin and a trunk full of plastic. Carboys, buckets, tubes, a massive bag of malt that looked like we were prepping to feed a horse. He set everything on our kitchen table like it was the Ark of the Covenant and said, "Dude, we're going to save so much money." I said, "On what?" He said, "Beer." I said, "By making beer?" He said, "By crafting experiences." That night he unboxed a starter kit and spread it across every horizontal surface we own. There were instruction sheets that looked like treasure maps, packets of yeast with names like American Ale 1056, and a plastic paddle the size of an oar. He heated water on our stove in the biggest stock pot we had, which had previously only known the gentle joy of Sunday chili, and our kitchen filled with a smell like damp cereal and hot bread. Not awful. Cozy even. I grabbed a stool and watched him stir mash like a witch finding himself. He looked happy, and I remembered why I'd said yes to a roommate. Life is cheaper and sometimes funnier with another human around. Then he asked where we should ferment it. We have one closet already full of a vacuum, 2 coats neither of us wear, and a mystery box labeled Xmas. We have a small laundry room where the dryer whines like it's haunted. We have 1 bathroom. Caleb peered into the bathroom like a contractor surveying a job site. He tapped the porcelain tub, nodding, as if it had volunteered. "Stable temps," he said. "Easy cleanup, splash zone protection." I said, "It's where I shower." He said, "We'll share the space." We did not share the space. The space was conquered. By Tuesday, he'd installed a fermentation chamber that was not, technically speaking, a chamber, but rather a dollar store tub of water in the bathtub with a cheap aquarium heater bobbing inside it, and a floating thermometer that never agreed with itself. Into this lukewarm lagoon went the primary fermenter, a 6.5-gallon plastic bucket fitted with a little S-shaped airlock that glorped like a happy swamp creature. The lid was sharpied. Cal Batch Number 1, American Pale Ale, with a smiley face that would later feel like foreshadowing. He taped a hand-drawn sign to the bathroom door. "Brewery in progress. Do not disturb, unless you have to pee." A smaller sign below it said, "Aim respectfully." For the first few days I was a good sport. The airlock made this soft, wet metronome sound blip, blip. That was, against all odds, soothing. The tub water steamed slightly. The bathroom smelled like a bakery had fallen into a pond. My showers became a delicate ballet around the bucket. Step in, avoid hose, don't kick heater, do not slip on the mysterious malt film that somehow appeared on the tile no matter how much I scrubbed. Caleb transformed. He woke early to whisper to the bucket like it owed him money. He texted me specific temperature readings as if I were the sous chef of yeast. He bought a hydrometer, a glass stick that proves beer is science, and would hold it up to the light like a jeweler appraising a diamond. When friends came over, he led tours. "Here's where the magic happens," he'd say, gesturing to our toilet. The magic had side effects. The apartment developed a low hum of damp. Fruit flies materialized. First 2, then 10, then a tiny cloud that I swear learned our schedules. The kitchen floor went sticky around the edges like a movie theater. Every rag in the apartment smelled faintly of sweet wort. Our cat, her name is Friday, she is judgment incarnate, decided the bathroom door was an enemy that required nightly yelling. I tried gently setting limits. Hey, can we keep the hoses off the toothbrush cup? Could we maybe not sanitize equipment in the sink while I'm making eggs? Caleb would nod earnestly, agree completely, then immediately rinse a carboy in the sink like he was baptizing a toddler. He started using phrases like cold crash and diacetyl rest in casual conversation, the way new parents say nap schedule. Batch number 1 was bottled in the kitchen after 2 weeks of blipping. I came home to a battlefield. Caps, sticky rings, beer foam drying into amber freckles across the cabinets. He'd lined up 40 brown bottles like soldiers and popped caps with a handheld gizmo that made a specific clack that my brain now associates with trauma. He handed me one, reverent. Give it 2 weeks to carbonate, he said. Then history. 2 weeks later, we clinked. The beer was not undrinkable, slightly flat, a hint of banana that shouldn't have been there. He called it estery. I called it fine. He called it the beginning. That night, he ordered more grain. Batch number 2 moved in before batch number 1 had even finished belching in the closet. He'd upgraded storage to free the bathroom, he said, then kept the bathroom anyway. The hydrometer readings became a mood ring for the apartment. Caleb bought a second bucket. He started a third. He propped the window open in January for airflow, and our heating bill sighed gently and died. By March, our bathroom had a schedule. Showering before 9 a.m. so we didn't shock the yeast. Brushing teeth at the kitchen sink on days he was cold crashing. No candle use, because open flame and ethanol vapor aren't best friends. I own fewer rules for operating a car than I did for peeing in my own home. There were small disasters on the way to the big one. A hose popped during a transfer and painted the hallway in a crisp amber stripe that only came off when I surrendered a security deposit's worth of elbow grease. The airlock clogged with Krausen, foam, I learned, because homebrewing gives pretentious names to messes, and burped a glistening blob onto the shower curtain. One Saturday, a bottle in the closet detonated with a report like a gunshot, and we stood in the dark, holding our breaths, listening for the rest to go off like a chorus of glass grenades. Only 3 more did. Bottle bombs, Caleb said, giddy and terrified. We're learning. And still, I was patient. I was patient when he labeled a stout night wizard and made me promise to use the name at parties. I was patient when he taped a "Do not enter CO2 purge" note over the bathroom like there was a dragon in there. I was patient when he added a second aquarium heater and called our tub a dual-zone fermentation vessel, as if we lived in a brewery and not a unit where the smoke alarm thinks toast is a crisis. The thing about pressure, I now know, is that it doesn't care about your passion. It doesn't care about your YouTube courses or your artisanal brand. It accumulates quietly while you call your mom to brag. It hides in caps and in hoses and in lids that aren't quite seated. And then one day, when the humidity has made the paint peel at the corners and the fruit flies have learned to spell, it looks at your bathtub full of warm sweet soup and says, now. The last normal thing I remember before the blast was Caleb standing in the doorway, hands on hips, gazing upon his bubbling kingdom and declaring, batch number 5 is the one. I can feel it. He could feel something all right. If part 1 was the prologue, part 2 is when things started to get sticky. Literally. By the time Caleb hit batch number 3, I'd stopped calling it our bathroom. It was the brewery. The shower curtain was permanently drawn back, exposing the tub like a patient on an operating table. He'd draped a towel over the side to insulate the fermenter. Read, old SpongeBob towel smelling faintly of mildew. The toilet tank was now shelf space for sanitizer bottles, iodine tablets, and a stack of brewing books he never actually opened. There was one sacred rule: do not flush during active fermentation. Apparently, temperature shock and pressure backflow were enemies of the yeast. This meant I was sometimes sprinting to the gas station across the street for a bathroom emergency, while my own toilet sat 10 feet away, guarded by Caleb's bubbling plastic buckets like some kind of sudsy Cerberus. Beer in its early stages doesn't smell like beer. It smells like someone boiled bread dough and then left it in a locker room. The first few times I thought, hey, I can live with this. By batch number 4, the smell had moved in. The entire apartment carried a permanent undertone of malt and fermentation. Sweet, sickly, sweaty. I Febrezed, I opened windows, I lit candles. Nothing won. It was like the yeast was colonizing my nasal cavity. One night I had friends over for poker. Within 5 minutes, one of them wrinkled his nose and asked, "Dude, did something die in your vents?" Caleb perked up from the couch and said proudly, "That's the yeast working." They left after 2 rounds. Our upstairs neighbor, Mrs. G, a retired teacher who always smelled faintly of menthol and disapproval, knocked on our door one afternoon holding her mail like a weapon. "What are you boys doing in there?" she demanded. "The whole hallway stinks like bread gone bad." Before I could apologize, Caleb appeared behind me in an apron that said, "Trust the yeast," and announced, "Ma'am, you're smelling the future." She reported us to the landlord the next day. Our landlord, a wiry guy named Stan who wore sunglasses indoors like he was in witness protection, showed up unannounced. He sniffed the air the second he walked in, frowned, and muttered, "What the hell is that smell?" I tried to play dumb. Maybe cooking?" Caleb grinned and said, "Home brewing. Wanna see?" Before I could stop him, he marched Stan into the bathroom like a proud parent at a science fair. Stan stared at the tub, the buckets, the hoses, the sticky residue creeping up the tile. He opened his mouth, then closed it, then muttered, "As long as nothing explodes, I don't want to know." That became the curse. Caleb started ordering specialty grains in bulk. Our porch became a storage zone for giant sacks of malt that raccoons immediately tried to tear open. He bought a second-hand mini-fridge for lagers, jammed it into our already cramped kitchen, and ran an extension cord across the floor like a tripwire. He stole my good colander for sparging. He used my mixing bowls for sanitizer solution. I stopped fighting. I was outnumbered. One me, one roommate, 1 million yeast cells that seemed to own the lease more than I did. But even Caleb could sense that tension was rising. He started talking about the big one. His words, not mine. Batch number 5. The beer that would prove all the hassle was worth it. He told everyone at the bar he worked at that he was brewing the cleanest IPA this side of the Rockies. He bought a digital thermometer. He gave pep talks to the fermenter like it was a toddler about to start kindergarten. The bathroom hummed. The yeast bubbled. The airlock blipped. Pressure built, quietly, invisibly, like a coiled spring. I'd begun to shower at the gym. I kept flip-flops by the door to avoid sticky tile ambushes. Every time I brushed my teeth, I'd glance at the tub and wonder, what happens if all this blows? Caleb reassured me constantly. Relax, man. Brewing's safe. It's science. I'm in control. But Caleb was the kind of guy who once set off our smoke alarm microwaving Pop-Tarts. His control was duct tape, good vibes, and YouTube comments. I started having nightmares of foamy tidal waves rushing down our hallway. And then came the week the fermenter started rattling in its tub like a caged animal. If you've ever stood next to a pressure cooker and thought, wow, if this thing goes wrong, my face is going to be soup, then you already know how I felt living with Caleb's brewery. Except instead of soup, it was 5 gallons of sticky alcoholic sludge with the consistency of pond water and the temperament of C4. Batch number 5 was alive, and not in a poetic sense. The fermenter started to vibrate in the tub like it was trying to crawl out. At night, lying in bed, I'd hear it. A faint rattle followed by a glorp that echoed through the pipes. Caleb loved it. "That's active fermentation, baby," he said, grinning like a proud dad listening to his kid's heartbeat on an ultrasound. I did not love it. I started brushing my teeth with one foot out the door, ready to sprint. The smell got stronger, sweeter, sharper. It stopped being bread gone bad and became bakery dumpster in July. Fruit flies responded like they'd received tiny invitations in the mail. They swarmed. They hovered. They nested in the kitchen drain. One morning, I stumbled into the bathroom half asleep and found the airlock completely covered with tiny black dots. Fruit flies, all drunk and sluggish, partying on Caleb's magical bubbling soup. I gagged. Caleb said, "They're just curious, natural quality checkers." I said, "They're bugs in your beer, man." He said, "It's extra protein." By week 2, the bubbling noises weren't soothing anymore. They were ominous. The airlock popped like it was under strain. The tub water sloshed slightly when the fermenter burped. Sometimes it whined, a long squeak that made me think of submarine movies right before the hull collapses. I asked Caleb if it was supposed to do that. He shrugged. Means it's vigorous. I said, vigorous sounds like a problem. He said, science is vigorous. I tried everything short of calling the fire department. I Googled homebrew explosions and showed him photos of shattered carboys and walls painted amber. I begged him to at least move the fermenter into the basement of the bar where he worked. I even offered to chip in for a real brewing kit. He laughed every time. Relax, man. The tub contains it. It's literally the safest place, which is exactly the kind of sentence you hear in documentaries right before the screen cuts to black, and the narrator says, but it wasn't safe at all. The day before the explosion, I walked into the bathroom to grab aspirin and found the fermenter lid bulging. The airlock hissed like it was struggling. The entire bucket had swelled into a fat, wobbling balloon. I swear the thing growled at me. Caleb, I said, voice cracking. This is bad. He peeked in, wiped his hands on his apron and said, nah, she's just reaching her peak. Tomorrow, we rack it to secondary. Tomorrow never came. That night, I lay awake listening to the rattle and pop of the airlock. Every sound made my stomach clench. At 3 a.m., there was a particularly loud hiss, like a tire blowing out. I bolted upright, sure it was happening. But then, silence. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed of foam flooding the apartment, fruit flies surfing the waves, Caleb riding a plastic bucket like a rodeo cowboy screaming, "Trust the yeast!" And then, the next afternoon, the bathtub brewery detonated. It happened on a Saturday. I remember because I had been looking forward to my one day off, my one chance to exist in peace without the constant bubbling soundtrack of Caleb's science project. Spoiler, I did not get peace. The day started deceptively normal. Caleb was in the kitchen crushing grain with a rolling pin like he was tenderizing steaks. I was on the couch, headphones in, trying to ignore the sticky film that now permanently coated our floors. Every time he passed the bathroom, he peeked in like a proud parent checking a crib. He said, "She's looking real active today." He called the bucket she, which made me deeply uncomfortable, but I let it slide. Around 2 p.m., I went to brush my teeth. Again, kitchen sink. Our bathroom was off limits. I passed the door and heard a strange thunk. Not the usual blip or burp. A low, wet thunk. "Caleb?" I called. He waved me off. Pressure equalizing, totally normal. At 2:47 p.m., I was scrolling my phone on the couch when it happened. First came a crack. Loud, sharp, like a baseball bat hitting drywall. Then a boom that shook the entire apartment. I dropped my phone. Caleb screamed from the kitchen. A split second later, a wave of foam erupted from the bathroom doorway like a geyser. Thick, beige, yeasty foam, spraying out in bursts like fire hydrant runoff. The smell hit next. Sour, bready, alcoholic. Imagine every frat party floor condensed into a single breath. I gagged instantly. We sprinted to the bathroom. The sight burned into my retinas. The fermenter lid had blown clean off, ricocheted into the ceiling and cracked the plaster. 5 gallons of half-fermented beer were geysering upward, hitting the light fixture, raining down like a sticky monsoon. The shower curtain, once white, was now brown and sagging under the weight of beer-soaked foam. Fruit flies swarmed like they'd been summoned to Valhalla. The tub couldn't contain it. Foam spilled over the edge, cascading onto the floor, seeping into the hallway carpet. It oozed with a horrifying slow-motion determination, like The Blob, but drunk. Caleb just stood there, hands on his head, repeating, "No, no, no, no!" I yelled, "Turn it off!" Which made no sense because you can't turn off yeast. We tried to contain it. Towels? Useless, instantly soaked, turned into sticky pancakes. Buckets? Pointless. The volume was endless. Caleb tried to scoop foam with a saucepan, like he was bailing out the Titanic with a teacup. I grabbed the plunger, thinking maybe I could at least keep the drain clear. Instead, I created a whirlpool that sprayed directly onto the ceiling. Now the ceiling dripped too. The sound was unbearable. Gurgling, fizzing, hissing. Like 1,000 sodas opening at once. The smell burned my nose. My feet stuck to the floor with every step. Then the neighbors started banging on the walls. Someone yelled, "What the hell are you doing in there?" Another voice shouted, "Call the cops." Finally, after what felt like hours, probably 15 minutes, The fermenter sagged in on itself. The geyser slowed to a dribble. Foam coated everything. Walls, ceiling, mirror, toilet, even the vent fan. The bathroom looked like it had been tarred and feathered with pancake batter. Caleb collapsed onto the hallway floor, soaked, sticky, smelling like a brewery dumpster. He looked at me with wide, horrified eyes and whispered, "We lost the batch." I wanted to strangle him. That was the explosion. The bathroom looked like a frat house had lost a food fight against a bread factory. And somehow, it was my life. Foam was everywhere. Not, oh, messy kitchen everywhere. I mean crime scene levels. The ceiling dripped like a beer stalactite cave. The shower curtain had collapsed under the weight of sticky sludge. The toilet seat was frosted like a grotesque cake. Even the hallway carpet had absorbed a creeping, yeasty tide that made every step a squelch. Our cat Friday sat on the counter, tail puffed, eyes wide, looking at me like, "This is why I only respect myself." The smell was indescribable. Sweet, sour, rotting fruit mixed with gym socks and a hint of vinegar. It clawed into your nose and didn't let go. I gagged, Caleb dry-heaved. The cat retreated to my bedroom and refused to come out for 48 hours. Caleb's first words after the foam settled, "Maybe we can salvage it." I stared at him, dripping beer from my hair, and said, "Salvage? You turned our bathroom into Chernobyl with bubbles." He looked genuinely offended. "It's just over-carbonation. Happens all the time." I pointed at the ceiling where foam dripped into the light fixture. "Does that look like all the time to you?" We started with towels. Within minutes, we had a mountain of saturated sticky rags that smelled like they'd been pulled from a pirate ship. We tried wringing them into the sink, but the drain clogged instantly with yeasty sludge. Caleb poured boiling water down it, which only created hot beer steam that made me want to vomit. Next, we tried buckets. We scooped foam into them and carried them to the fire escape to dump. A neighbor smoking outside yelled, "You guys brewing bathtub beer?" And I wanted to leap into traffic. We scrubbed the walls. We mopped the floors. We opened every window. Nothing worked. The smell wasn't just in the bathroom anymore, it had spread to the entire apartment, like the yeast was colonizing new territory. At 6 p.m., there was a knock at the door. Stan, our landlord, sunglasses perched on his forehead like he'd just come back from Vegas, sniffed once and said, "Jesus Christ." He stepped inside, surveyed the sticky battlefield and whispered, "I told you not to let anything explode." Caleb tried to charm him. "It's under control. Just a minor fermentation accident." Stan looked at me, foam still clinging to my shirt, and said, "Minor?" I didn't even argue. I just gestured at the beer waterfall dripping down the hallway wall. Stan pinched the bridge of his nose. "You're paying for this. Both of you. Walls, tiles, carpet. If I get another call from a tenant about beer bugs, you're out." And then he left, muttering, "Goddamn kids," as he stomped down the stairs. That night, 3 different neighbors knocked. Mrs. G from upstairs, waving her slipper at me, said, "My apartment smells like a brewery." The guy next door asked if we'd flooded his unit because his ceiling was dripping. A college kid from down the hall just grinned and said, "Invite me next time." I wanted the earth to swallow me whole. By midnight, Caleb had finally stopped trying to rescue the batch. He sat cross-legged in the kitchen, covered in beer, drinking a Bud Light he'd bought at the corner store. He looked at me and said, "Maybe we shouldn't brew in the bathtub anymore." I just stared at him. My entire soul was sticky. That was the immediate aftermath. But it only got worse. If Part 5 was the cleanup montage, Part 6 is where the consequences rolled in like a second tidal wave. Spoiler, the yeast was not done punishing us. 3 days later, Stan slid an envelope under our door. Inside, a typed letter with a list of damages, and an estimate that looked like the down payment on a car. Bathroom ceiling repair, $400. Tile grout replacement, $300. Carpet cleaning in hallway, $250. Professional odor removal service, $500. Light fixture replacement, $150. Inconvenience fee, $200. Total, $1,800. At the bottom, handwritten in angry Sharpie, "You pay or you're out." Caleb read it, scratched his chin and said, "That's not so bad. We'll just split it." I said, "Split it? I didn't brew beer Chernobyl in the tub, Caleb. This is you." He shrugged. "But we're roommates." I wanted to tape the letter to his forehead. "You think you can clean beer foam with a mop? Wrong." You think bleach will kill the smell? Wrong. You think airing out the place for days will help? Wrong. That smell had woven itself into the DNA of the apartment. It clung to the grout, seeped into the walls, even lingered in my clothes. I'd show up to work and people would sniff the air like, why does this guy smell like he rolled around in a dive bar floor? I tried industrial cleaners, vinegar, baking soda, even a desperate internet hack where you simmer lemon peels on the stove. Nothing worked. The whole place was permanently Oda Bathtub Brewery. Remember the fruit flies? The explosion was their invitation to thrive. Within days we had swarms, clouds, biblical plagues. They hovered in the kitchen, dove into drinks, kamikazed into my cereal. I'd open the bathroom door and feel them buzz against my face like static. I bought fly traps, dozens. The sticky paper ones looked like Jackson Pollock paintings within hours. I set out bowls of vinegar. I vacuumed midair. Still they came. Caleb said, "It's just a cycle. They'll die off." They did not die off. They reproduced. They evolved. They looked at me with tiny eyes and whispered, "This is our apartment now." What really made me insane wasn't the foam or the flies. It was Caleb. He still tried to justify it. Every brewer has an explosion story. Technically, this is how Guinness started. You'll laugh about this someday. I was not laughing. I was Googling short-term leases and how much is manslaughter in Ohio. The night after Stan's bill, Caleb actually tried to start batch number 6. I caught him rinsing a carboy in the sink like nothing had happened. "Absolutely not," I snapped. "No more brewing in this apartment." He blinked at me. "But I fixed the lid issue." "Caleb, you don't fix the Titanic by taping over the hole." Our friendship roommate dynamic was circling the drain faster than the beer foam had, when it wasn't clogging the pipes. I started spending nights at friends' places just to breathe non-beer air. He accused me of abandoning the project. "Project?" I said. "This isn't a project. This is a war crime." We stopped eating meals together. We stopped watching TV. The only thing we shared now was a bill from the landlord and a smell that would outlive cockroaches. That was the fallout. But the story didn't end there. By this point, our apartment was basically unlivable. The smell clung like a curse. The fruit flies had claimed sovereignty. And Caleb was still delusionally talking about the next batch, as though we hadn't just reenacted a yeast-driven apocalypse. The collapse was inevitable. Stan came back for an inspection a week later. He didn't even knock, just used his key and barged in, sunglasses on like he was shielding his eyes from our sins. The second he opened the door, he gagged. "God, it still smells like beer hell in here." He walked into the bathroom, shook his head at the stained ceiling, and muttered, "I told you kids don't explode anything." Then he turned to us and said, "You've got 2 choices. Pay me in full by the end of the month, or I start eviction proceedings." I tried to reason with him, maybe negotiate down the fee. Caleb cut me off by saying, "But technically, the tub's fine. Structurally sound." Stan just pointed at the dripping ceiling vent and walked out. Faced with eviction, Caleb had what he thought was a genius plan. We brew one really good batch, sell it to my bar buddies, make the cash, pay Stan, and we're golden. I stared at him. "Your solution to exploding beer is more beer?" He grinned. "Controlled environment this time. I'll use the closet." I threatened to call Stan myself if he so much as brought another bag of malt into the apartment. That was the breaking point. Caleb accused me of being unsupportive of his passion. I accused him of turning our home into an insect-infested brewery crime scene. We stopped speaking. I kept to my room, plotting my escape. He sulked in the kitchen, nursing Bud Lights like a fallen king. The fruit flies celebrated their victory in every corner. 2 weeks later, I found a sublet across town. Small, overpriced, smelled faintly of cigarettes. But it had a bathroom that only hosted showers and toilets, not science experiments. I packed in silence. Caleb didn't help. The day I left, he looked up from his laptop, where he was Googling cheap fermentation buckets, and said, "You're going to regret walking away from this." I laughed. For the first time in months, I laughed. The only thing I regret is not leaving sooner. I loaded my boxes into a friend's car and drove off, windows down, savoring the clean air. I heard through the grapevine, pun intended, that Caleb eventually got kicked out. Stan found another batch bubbling in the hallway closet, flies buzzing around like a bad omen, and that was the last straw. Rumor has it, Caleb moved back in with his parents, and now brews in their garage. Somewhere out there, another innocent household has been claimed. As for me, I got my deposit back minus half the damages. Stan said he'd seen worse. I doubt it. The smell stuck with me for weeks, though. I'd wake up in my new place and swear I could still smell that sour, sweet yeast funk. PTSD, post-traumatic suds disorder. What did I learn? 1. Never ever let your roommate say the words bathtub and brewery in the same sentence. 2. Yeast doesn't care about your dreams. It only cares about exploding. 3. If your landlord ever says, "As long as nothing explodes, I don't want to know," start packing immediately. Most importantly, trust your instincts. If something smells bad, rattles ominously, and attracts fruit flies in biblical proportions, don't let someone convince you it's the future.